Hello to college football's peek around the corner with your host Greg Pflugar. Finally, we get to launch this YouTube channel. It's been, years in the making. I want to thank first my beautiful wife Mireya and all my family, my nieces, my nephews, my brothers and sisters, my smack friends, mom and pop, everybody. We finally got this channel going. I hope you enjoy this first episode. This first episode is going to be all about the Big Ten media contract that was just reported by Sports Business Journal a couple nights ago. What a massive deal, not just in money, but in exposure for the Big Ten. And we're going to be discussing how it affects the college football world and how it affects Notre Dame's Fighting Irish decision to either stay as an independent in football, as they've done over the last 100 years, or join a conference, the Big Ten Conference, for example. So we're going to be discussing that. The first episode we thought was going to be about how we broke the story here at Peek Around the Corner, the story that USC called Big Ten early in the spring to start talks in getting an invitation to the Big Ten Conference. A major publication, a major newspaper is going to be doing an article on how we broke that story. So we're going to lay off on talking about that. We'll probably do it in maybe episode 3 or 4, but there's a lot to discuss in college football now. That's why we moved up the Peek Around the Corner launch from August 10th to today, because we need to talk about this Big Ten contract. We need to talk about college football. I think our second episode is going to be my predictions on who's going to win the Heisman, who's going to win the conferences, championships, and who's going to go to the college football playoffs and who's going to win the championship game. We're going to start talking about college football games. Finally, the season's going to start here on August 27th when Nebraska plays Northwestern at Dublin, Ireland. So this channel is going to be all about college football. The wins, the losses, the celebrations, the tears. Oh, I know how to cry because I'm a Gopher fan. So it's going to be all about college football, all 12 months of the season. Thank you for joining me today on this first episode. Big Ten contract. What does it mean? What is it? Big Ten contract the new one starts July 1st, 2023. So it's going to start for the next football season, not this football season, for next football season. According to SBJ's reporting, the Sports Business Journal, ESPN will be no longer tied, no longer a media partner with the Big Ten. After 40 years, ESPN will no longer be distributing college football, Big Ten college football content. Unbelievable. After 40 years, a massive change. So who will be the media partners for the Big Ten Conference? Well, we know it's going to be Fox Sports. They have a long-term relationship between Big Ten and Fox. Fox owns 61% of the Big Ten network. The other 39% is owned by the Big Ten Conference and its institutions. So we know Fox Sports is the major player of Big Ten content, the major media partner. But the other media partners are now going to be CBS and NBC. So on Saturday, you're going to have a triple header of Big Ten football, at least a triple header of Big Ten football. Eastern time, you're going to start out 12 o'clock, big noon, on Fox. That's the first game. Then the 3:30 game Eastern time is going to be on CBS. And then the third game, the triple header, the primetime game, is going to be on NBC. Massive exposure. Massive exposure for Big Ten football. How about the money? Well, so far we have reports that CBS is going to be paying $350 million a year to the Big Ten. NBC is going to be paying $350 million to the Big Ten. And neither of those media partners, CBS or NBC, has Tier 1 games. At least we don't believe so at this point. neither NBC or CBS will have the first choice during the 13-14 week season. We believe Fox will. Now, details may come later on, reports where maybe at times CBS and NBC gets the number one game. But for right now, it's being reported that CBS and NBC will rotate the second and third choice games, the plethora of Big Ten games that are played every week, that CBS and NBC rotates on choice number 2 and 3. And they're paying $700 million a year to the Big Ten. And it won't even be games like Michigan versus Ohio State. That will be a Fox game. That's unbelievable money Big Ten's getting. Unbelievable. And we don't know what Fox Sports is going to be paying. Could it be $600 million for all those Tier 1 games? So you're going to have NBC, CBS, Fox. You also have the Big Ten Network that's going to be showing 2 or 3 games a week. FS1 will be showing a game. There's reports out there that Peacock will be streaming. They will have their own small streaming package. They might even simulcast a game that's being played on NBC. There's also reports at this late hour, because this Big Ten contract is not signed yet by the Big Ten schools. We don't know if it sounds like Apple and Amazon are trying to get a small package of games to stream. Those two streaming services. It's going to be one or the other, or neither. But they're trying to get some games, Big Ten content. So Kevin Warren, the commissioner of the Big Ten, is basically mirroring what the NFL does in regards to distribution of content. He's spreading it out. Unlike the SEC, which all their content is owned by ESPN. All the content of ACC is owned by ESPN. Kevin Warren's going completely a different route. There is no more ESPN for Big Ten in 2023. It's amazing. Years ago, I think it was 2010, 2011, ESPN lowballed Jim Delaney, then the Big Ten commissioner. A lowballed offer with Jim Delaney. And Jim Delaney says, I can't take this offer. I'm going to take my content out there in the open market. And ESPN said, well, go ahead, roll those dice. And Jim Delaney said back to ESPN, consider those dice rolled. That's what Kevin Warren just did, times 10 to ESPN. So Big Ten has a massive contract, right? And money. We don't know what that is yet. Could be 1.5 million, could be 1.5 billion, could be 1.6 billion a year. We do not know yet how it's going to be. But we know it's going to be massive in money and in exposure. Okay, but what does that really mean? Here's the deal. College football, college sports has changed dramatically. The world has changed. The total deregulation of college sports is now upon us. The Supreme Court has ruled in the Alston case, in the name, image, and likeness case, that a school, an institution, the NCAA needs to treat the student athlete in the same manner it treats the student. If a great cello player from the University of Florida, let's say there's a 19-year-old great cello player, if she wants to sell her name, image, and likeness to a marketing company, she can. If a great chess player from Dartmouth wants to open up a YouTube channel and he believes he can monetize his ability to teach the game to others, he can. So a student athlete should be able to sell their name, image, and likeness. A tight end from South Carolina should be able to sell his name, image, and likeness to the pizza parlor down the street. And now he can. The Supreme Court does not approve of what the NCAA is doing. They don't believe they have the right to govern the way they've been governing. So therefore, total deregulation means that the conferences themselves will now have the power to make the rules, or most of the rules. The conferences are becoming more and more powerful. You just saw Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, say in the SEC media days that basically we can go alone if we need to. If we can't get buy-in from the other FBS conferences, we'll go alone. We can make our own college football playoffs, for example. We just saw Kevin Warren at the Big Ten meetings, July 26, 27, Big Ten media days. You heard what he had to say. He said Big Ten's going to be bold, innovative. We will choose the next time we expand with our, if you go back and listen to what he says, you can sense it, you feel it. These conference commissioners, especially the two wealthy ones, the SEC and the Big Ten, they're going to be throwing their weight around even more than ever. Here's the big one. In total deregulation. Yes, SEC and Big Ten will be able to make their own rules. They can create a bigger, larger college football staff for their teams if they want. They can offer more scholarships for their baseball teams, their softball teams, their volleyball teams. But they also can do revenue sharing. Revenue sharing is coming down the pike. That's the peek around the corner for today. Big Ten is going to be starting eventually, soon, in a year or two. This Big Ten media contract that they got, this big media money, they're going to be sharing that revenue to its student athletes. And we don't believe it's just going to be the football players and the basketball players. It's going to be the non-revenue creating sports as well. This payment's either going to come directly from the conference or the schools themselves. But the student athletes' compensation is going to be increased big time. That's going to happen. Kevin Warren has talked about exploring the idea with his student athlete council headed by Sean Clifford, the quarterback of Penn State. I don't think they've had any serious talks, but Kevin Warren, it could even be unions created with collective bargaining agreements. Possibly. But even if it falls short of that, there's going to be, student athletes are going to have more and more of a voice, and they're going to be compensated more and more. So, all these things are driving one. If I can make one point today, it's this. Conferences now are incentivized more than ever to become bigger, stronger, wealthier, healthier, and grab more than market share of all of college sports more than ever. Before, they didn't have really the incentive to do that. Now they do. For all the reasons we've discussed already on this episode. SEC schools, they could vote on, they can do their own revenue sharing. They can tie it in with academics, with grades. Big Ten can do the same. Of course, the Pac can, and the ACC can, and the Big 12 can, and the 10 G5 conferences can, but they won't have the money revenue to compensate the student athletes as much as the SEC and the Big Ten. And you all know this. The money gap is just growing exponentially year after year after year. This is what drove Texas and Oklahoma. The total deregulation of college sports, this is what drove Texas and Oklahoma to call Greg Sankey and the SEC and say, how can we start the process to get an invitation to join the SEC? And this is what drove USC to call the Big Ten. People talk about the national media was so shocked that USC and UCLA made the announcement that they were joining the Big Ten on June 30th. They were floored. We were talking about it since March 31st because we knew all the incentives that USC had to do it. We knew all the incentives and described it for the Big Ten to do it. And you can see it in this result of this incredible media contract. The national media was just floored. And they're still not quite understanding Kevin Warren's vision. Kevin Warren's decisions are mirroring the NFL's decision. He's trying to form the same structure as the NFL. You can see how he's distributing Big Ten content. Big Ten is not done expanding. Hello. Big Ten is not done expanding. They're just not. We're going to be talking about it in a later episode in regards to Oregon, Washington. I think I said Oregon correctly. Oregon, Washington, Notre Dame, Stanford. We're going to be talking about that in a later episode. But Big Ten is not done expanding. They want to grow a bigger market share of the total college sports. SEC and Big Ten are counteracting. They're going against each other. Okay? This is big time. This is a proxy war between ESPN and Fox. This is not all good. This is not all bad. I'm not arguing that it is. I'm just giving you a peek around the corner. Big Ten is not done expanding. They're going to use their advantage, their strength, their media money, this contract, this exposure, and they're going to push the envelope. And the SEC will as well. So how does this affect Notre Dame? They have a decision to make. I know my cousins in Chicago right now, the Kings family, especially Mary King, is probably yelling at the TV and say, "Don't say it, Greg. Don't say it, Greg." I'm going to say it. Notre Dame cannot continue on as an independent football program. Not in this changed world where the conferences are more powerful than ever. People are discussing, they're arguing, they're debating that, Notre Dame's going to get a big contract with NBC. I don't think it's going to be big enough. They might try it. They might try for another year. But you got to understand, these super conferences are going to be creating more revenue streams, different revenue streams. They're going to be selling real-time data to sports books in Las Vegas, DraftKings. More and more wagering in Vegas has to do during a live event football game or a sporting event. SEC and the Big Ten are working on packages to send real data to the sports books in real time. They're going to make massive amount of money. Notre Dame can't do that. Notre Dame won't. The super conferences could create a semifinal weekend. A weekend before their conference championship games, they could create a semifinal weekend. We've discussed that on Twitter and at Minnesota 247. And we'll get more into that in later episodes. Notre Dame has all their sports except for men's hockey and football, all their sports in the ACC. So they're going to have to abide by ACC rulings on when ACC creates their rules for compensations for their student athletes. Notre Dame is going to have to abide by the ACC's votes and rulings on how many scholarships they can afford for their baseball team, because Notre Dame's baseball team plays in the ACC. The ACC has become an albatross for Notre Dame, especially in this new world, because ACC doesn't have the immediate contract the SEC and Big Ten has, and they won't get it because they've signed a grant of rights on their current contract all the way to 2036. I know a lot of you know this. And for those who don't quite understand this information, we'll go in more detail later on. The world has changed. The conferences are becoming more powerful. There's this economic forces that are saying that they want consolidation. Big brands want to play big brands more often. All this is incentivizing the super conferences to become bigger and stronger. And Greg Sankey and Commissioner Kevin Warren of the SEC and Big Ten are acting on the conditions of the economic forces and the total deregulation of college sports. That's your peek around the corner. This is not stopping. This is not slowing down. I know a lot of people are tired of it, but I'm just telling you how it is. I'm giving you that peek. Notre Dame has a decision to make. Can they afford to stay as independent program and for the football program? We don't believe they can. Jack Swarbrick was interviewed a couple months ago, Sports Illustrated, and he said there was 3 reasons why Notre Dame could look at joining a conference. If they couldn't get a media partner, secure a media partner in the future. Number 2, if Notre Dame couldn't keep up with revenues to play at the highest levels of college sports. Or number 3, they didn't have access to college football playoffs. Well, college football playoffs. The current college football playoffs have 4 teams going into 4 teams get invited. It's not really a playoff, it's an invitational. And that playoff structure ends in 2026. What happens after 2026? We don't know what the college football playoffs is going to look like. We know if they were talking about changing the college football playoffs a couple years ago. They were thinking about expanding the number of teams that would make the college football playoffs. But it needed a consensus. It needed everybody to vote yes to change the college football playoffs. Going forward after 2026 doesn't need consensus. In fact, we don't even know who's going to be in the room to vote for the new college football playoffs. Is it going to be all 10 FBS conferences and Notre Dame? Is the vote just going to go by majority rule? And again, who's even going to be in that room to vote? It could possibly be SEC goes on their own, like they threatened during the SEC media days. They could stage their own playoffs. They could keep all that playoff money, that media money, which is going to be gigantic. They could keep it all to themselves, form their own galaxy. Big Ten could form their own big galaxy. Or the Big Ten and SEC could come together and deny access for everybody else. I don't think that's going to happen, but just the mere threat of that could happen will make it so SEC and Big Ten has all this bargaining power when they do meet with all the FBS conferences in Notre Dame. So yeah, Notre Dame will probably have college football access, probably after 2026, if they stay as an independent team in football. But that's not guaranteed. And the revenue aspect, I'm not a believer that Notre Dame is going to be able to keep up in revenue. I know people are speculating that Notre Dame will probably get a big contract with NBC. Big Ten just did. I don't know if it's going to be enough. Will Notre Dame really get $75, $80 million a year in their TV contract with NBC for 7 home games? And would that even be enough? The Big Ten schools are probably going to make $100 million a year just on media money, and then conference payouts when you throw in NCAA tourney credits, college football revenue, all the things that these super conferences can do. I don't think Notre Dame can keep up. And I think Jack Swarbrick knows this. Jack Swarbrick said a couple months ago, They said all these institutions are going to have to align themselves with one of the two solar systems that are now forming, SEC and the Big Ten. And Jack Swarbrick was talking about Notre Dame themselves. Jack Swarbrick also said that he had been talking to people and he knew that all these schools were calling the Big Ten and SEC hoping to get in. And you better believe that Notre Dame and USC has been discussing this for months. We know that USC's been recruiting Notre Dame to the Big Ten. Again, we'll get to that in the USC episode later on, hopefully by next week. The world has changed. We don't believe Notre Dame can afford to stay independent. They might give it another year. But right now they have the leverage. From about August 15th to October 15th, we know that Notre Dame has the leverage to dictate terms to the Big Ten, just like USC had, to say this is what we want out of the future in the Big Ten. These are the teams we want as permanent rivals. We do not want to play Friday night games at home. Whatever it is, Notre Dame has the leverage now, not a year from now, not 2 years from now. They have the leverage. Soon after this Big Ten media contract is signed, sealed, and delivered, that is when Notre Dame can really press the leverage, just like USC did in the spring. Right now, and it's been reported by The Athletic, right now, when this Big Ten media deal is signed, there are carve-outs, there are scenarios, there's all this stuff in the contract behind the scenes that says if Big Ten expands, the media partners know what the expectations are of how they're going to pay for the expansion. If team A, B, C, D are added. It's all being lined up. So yeah. There's a lot going on. The world has changed. Total deregulation, meaning the consolidation of content, these two things meeting together, and it has exploded onto the scene. Big Ten is not done yet. They're not done expanding. And we're going to talk about more of that in the next episode. We're also going to be talking about my predictions on who's going to win the college football playoffs, who's going to win the conference races, the conference championship games. My Heisman Trophy winner, Will Anderson Jr., rush edge from Alabama. He's going to take it. But anyways, that's for the next episode. You know how this works. If you enjoyed this content, please hit the like button. If you enjoyed this content, please share the video and subscribe to the channel. I would thank you so very, very much if you could do that. So this has been the first episode of Peek Around the Corner. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please leave comments down below and I will get to them in the next episode. I will answer some of those comments. Someday soon, hopefully we can begin live streaming. But for now, I'm just excited that we could finally get this first episode out. And again, hopefully soon, by next week, we can break down how we broke the story of USC calling the Big Ten in the spring. So until then, until next time, please, from us at Peek Around the Corner, you all take care of each other. Thanks.